Salami this round.
Well, it's 13 minutes past 6 p.m. and it is day 6 of the glorious month of Ramadan. Alhamdulillah, we are close on to 1 week into this beautiful month of Ramadan, and we trust and hope that you are still enjoying the mercy, the blessings, the goodness that this beautiful month of Ramadan brings. And at the same time, let us also think about those who are less fortunate than us. And there are many people that are battling, people that are battling to even buy essential food products. They don't even know when the next meal is going to come from or where it's going to come from, whether it's going to be just a loaf of bread or even half a loaf of bread. There are people that are in this dire situation. So as we observe this month of Ramadan, let us think about all of these people who don't have, and let us not overindulge on our side as well, because sometimes we tend to do this in the month of Ramadan in terms of overindulging, and this is losing the essence of Ramadan and the essence of what it means to fast during the month of Ramadan. But right now, we're going across to be joined by activist and bread cartel whistleblower who knows all about the suffering of people, about consumers, about how they are being ripped off, how they are being taken apart, in terms of pricing. And we've seen this in recent years where we've seen basic products just skyrocketing, unchecked and unjustified in many instances as well. And now we've learned about the Competition Commission investigating essential food prices. We're going across to be joined right now by none other than Imraahn Mukkadam. Imraahn, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ramadan Kareem to you, and welcome to the show.
Walaikum salam, Brother Inayet, and to the listeners of Salam Media as well. Ramadan Kareem.
Yes, we trust you're having a wonderful Ramadan, inshallah. And I always say, Imran, in South Africa, we cannot complain. We have a Ramadan of relative ease and comfort. But looking at many people who are battling, and they are battling in more ways than one. And one of them is this runaway train where we see this high cost of essential food products just running away from us, unchecked, unjustified, Imran.
Yes, we live in a country of so much opportunity and so many opportunists. So what we have is, the capitalist class and the business class using every possible excuse to profiteer. And we've seen this probably for the past 20 years. We've been putting our finger on it. And once again, we're seeing this, and the Competition Commission is very right in saying that food inflation is running at 13.5%, whilst the country is trying to target an inflation rate of 7%. So somewhere there's a disjuncture. And we're seeing, food inflation and food prices, especially bread and basic stuff like milk and bread. And we had this huge spike in the price of sunflower oil, which has now sort of stabilized a little bit. But overall, fruit and veg as well, we're seeing a lot of, price increases there. And conveniently, but also justifiably to a certain extent, but conveniently, load shedding is to be blamed. But we know from past experience that any excuse is good enough to push up prices. And it's a good thing that the Competition Commission is doing this market inquiry into basic foods to see how how much of this opportunism is happening, how much of this profiteering is happening. And we've been always advocating for a very long time that, especially on your essentials, bread, milk, staples, mealie meal, that there should be some sort of, if not price controls, at least profit controls, so that these big companies, if you look at their returns this year again, they're showing massive profits. They're showing massive profits. Your Pioneers, your Tiger brands, these big companies, they're doing very well despite load shedding, despite COVID, despite whatever else they put as justification for the kind of prices that we're seeing. There needs to be a balance, and the state has a role. As much as the free market advocates will say no, there's no place for that. We have to advocate that the state has a role in ensuring that at least the poorest of the poor is protected from this kind of rampant profiteering and price taking that's happening right now in especially the food markets.
Well, Imran, what you're saying is very interesting. And when we speak about profit control, rather than price control, and this is insane, where we see it over and over again, unjustified increases. And in many instances, yes, we've got issues. We know the price of oil and what is played out in Russia and Ukraine, and how this is impacted on markets right across the entire world. The same would go for things like ESCOM. But at the end of the day, the government the government is taking very little responsibility in terms of prescribing to these food manufacturers, to the retail outlets, and to a large extent, sometimes I do believe that they operate in cartels as well, Imran, and I think you know it as well as I do.
Well, we can't really expect the government to be our savior. We live in a gangster state where where it's almost on a daily basis, every aspect of our society is being degraded through corruption. We just look at the prisons with this Bester case and everything else that's happening. There's just no ways that we can really expect government to fix the problem. And we also see in South Africa, and this is also something as a consumer activist that I've been raising, many years, is that we have one of the most complacent consumer cultures in the world in terms of accepting the abuse that we're getting from the system, and it's systemic abuse. It's a systemic system that creates this kind of profit taking and profiteering, and the rich just exploiting to till there's no end. And one of the things that I was mentioning last week when I read an article on the possible increase in interest rates as well, the correlation between inflation and interest rate is, I'm asking the economists now for years, prove to me that by pushing up the interest rate you're going to bring down the inflation. Where's the proof in that? There is a jahil concept. It's a concept that has no basis in fact. And the Islamic system proves that interest rates can have no bearing in bringing down food inflation. And when you have artificial food inflation, then you have artificial interest inflation, and then on top of this, everybody else is paying more. And when you ask the very crucial question, Inayet Wadee, you need to just think about this. If the interest rate goes up by 25 basis points, 50 basis points, 100 basis points, 1%, 2%, the extra monies that the bank is getting on your debt that you're paying, what happens to that money? I've been asking this question and nobody can answer me. So really the system is so flawed. Inflation is a false concept. It's a concept that is manipulated, and interest is even a bigger fallacy in terms of trying to make sense of the logic of it in mathematician term, not from a ethical and religious perspective, just from a logical perspective. As a mathematician, explain to me how much more money does the banks and the Reserve Bank make every time they push up the interest, and what do they do with that more money that they take from the poor and the middle class and the working class? And obviously, every time the interest goes up, the food manufacturers use that as an excuse also to say, but we're paying more for interest also now on our loans, so we must pass that also on to the consumer who's already in battle. So the system is just a blood-sucking system where we are seeing so much of exploitation and abuse of especially the very small working and middle class that is left in South Africa, because the majority is unemployed anyway.
Mm. Well, definitely, and I think this is where you raise these issues, which makes a lot of sense. But just coming back to the Competition Commission and looking at the Competition Commission in terms of how far, Imran, are they able to take this investigation? Considering that they need to go back, they need to look back possibly in the last 2 years in terms of what has happened, and again, how far can they take it to make sure that those that are guilty of ripping off consumers like you and I are actually made to pay in some way or the other?
You see, market inquiries are much more difficult to place a finger on and to point a finger of blame at anyone than uncompetitive behavior and the other normal infringements of the Competition Act. But when they do a market inquiry, they are basically trying to understand why prices are going up and what are the drivers of these cost increases. So they will find, in all probability, that there has been some abuse and some increase in profits unjustifiably. But in South Africa, that necessarily is not against the law. So all that they can do is make recommendations. But the fact that they are having this inquiry is a positive thing, because it means somebody's watching. Somebody's watching, and somebody's creating awareness, and that is a good thing in itself. In that, if consumers can become a lot more price conscious and watch the space, then the chances are that there will be resistance to this onslaught of price increases. So it becomes very much a mind game, a propaganda game of really creating awareness about price increases and inflation and uncompetitive behavior, and make creating and educating consumers that they should not just accept the status quo, and they should not be as complacent as they are, and they should ask the questions around interest rate increases and food increases. And somewhere, somehow, we need our politicians, our opposition parties. They make a lot of noise about a lot of stuff. And I want to commend, even despite our personal views on the EFF, at least they took a position last week, Monday, and asked for a stay away. We should have a stay away on the price of bread. We should have mobilization around the price of electricity that's going to go up again 18, 20% next year. So all of these cost drivers, it just has a cyclical effect and a spiral effect and a ripple effect right through the value chain, and it pushes up inflation, and then the inflation is used to push up the interest rate, and we all are just paying more, but nobody can tell us where all this money is going to, because it's not really going into the cost of the end of the source of the goods. From the farm, if you look at from the farm gate to the shop shelf, the huge disparity there just on our basic vegetables and fruits and stuff like that, you see that there's so much markup because of middlemen exploiting the situation, because of corporate monopolies, the corporate retailers, the distribution chain. All of these are opportunities for price gouging, is the right name. It's price gouging is what they've been using, and every excuse possible. The Ukraine war, now the supply of wheat is stabilized, but the price of bread hasn't come down yet. So what's happening? We need to be asking these questions.
Well, Imran, many questions, and hopefully, we can find answers, and we can find answers very, very quickly to these questions. And again, you reinforce that consumer activism is needed in this country, and it needs to be a lot more vocal in terms of raising these issues that consumers have. But for now, Imran, we thank you We say shukran for your time with us this afternoon right here on the Iftar Drive on Salam Media. We wish you well, my brother, and also for the rest of the month of Ramadan. All the best to you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Walaikum salam, and shukran for having us.
Yes, Imraahn Mukkadam with us, and immediately after this interview heard on air, which is something we play out at normally at this time, and we are taking a look at this horrific development that had taken place, and we're talking about corruption in a South African prisons and the escape of a convicted rapist and murderer, Thabo Bester, and we will be hearing from independent investigative journalist Ruth Hopkins unpacking these developments regarding this escape convict. And with that, we're going to go thereafter. We'll be heading for the Asr Azan. It's time for Asr Salah, and we'll be linking up again at around 4:45, where we will go to Pakistan, and we're taking a look with senior journalists in Pakistan, based in Islamabad. We are talking about the interference of the Pakistani government in the judicial process. So that is still to come at around 4:45. And that will take us through to a number of other interviews that we will be having right until the time of Iftar at around 13 minutes past 6 in Johannesburg. So don't go away, stay with us.
Well, the big issue for me is the question, how come G4S, a global security company running this prison, still has the contract to run this prison? I mean, to me, this is just yet another very spectacular and very crazy example, but it's just yet another example of the abuse and the levels of corruption that I've been documenting for over 10 years in my book, Misery Merchants. A film came out, Prison for Profit. And there's been widespread torture, forced injections with antipsychotic drugs. Prisoners have been tortured to death, and the deaths have been covered up as suicide. And I've documented this, and I've approached the government, I've approached G4S, I've asked them for comments for years and years and years. They just look the other way. And my question now is, where's the accountability? Isn't it now time to call for an inquiry? Like, what is happening with these private security contractors in South Africa? What are they up to? What are they doing? Is these levels of human rights violations, is it really acceptable to a society such as a country such as South Africa, which has such a proud history in terms of human rights? It's horrific.
Well, I suppose the big issue here is what is it normal to actually outsource the running of and the management of prisons? And if that's the case, how widespread is that around the world? And how did this company that you refer to, G4S, how did they actually get the contract in the first place?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is a huge. The private security sector is really huge, represents billions. I mean, even G4S is the biggest security provider in the world. It has revenue of around £7 billion, and runs prisons all over the world. And if you look specifically at G4S, there are many other private security providers out there. But if you look at their prison operation in the UK, in the US, in Australia, they're running into very similar problems. Here in the UK, for example, in 2018, the situation in Birmingham prison, which was run by G4S, got so out of control that the state had to take over. What happened in South Africa in 2013? The situation in Mangaung prison got so out of control that the state had to take over. However, the difference is that in South Africa, the prison was handed back to G4S without any explanation, whereas in the UK, the state still runs Birmingham prison. So there's a difference.